everyone, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another video wrap-up where I try to get through all the books I read in a month as quickly as possible and give you a little bit of an overview of what I felt about them. So this is for August, and that is technically what I consider the last month of summer, at least reading-wise, because fall does start in September. So we will quickly go over what my stats are for the month. I read 27 total books in the month of August, which was 10,812 pages. All of them are physical. I did not really read anything that was specifically on Kindle Unlimited only. Some of them were in both, but I have the physical book, so I count it as physical. 14 romances, 8 fantasy, 2 thriller, 1 mystery, 1 lit fic, and 1 nonfiction. And my average rating was 3.9, which is excellent. As usual, I'm going to go through the books that were in a vlog first so that I can just get those out of the way. If you want more thoughts on them, I will tell you which vlog they're in and you can go look at that one. But to save time, I just quickly go through those. So the first reading vlog was reading the oldest books on my TBR. I took every book that I still had from last year that I had purchased and read those in that vlog, and it was 4 books, 1 I read last month, so there's only 3 that I'm gonna go over, and they are as follows. When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. This is a thriller, pretty dark thriller in my opinion. I talk about that a lot in the vlog. I gave this 2.75 and half spice. Not really the kind of thriller that I would reach for, but it did come in my book of the month. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't something that I would feel comfortable recommending based on my preferences. Then I read Love It's Complicated by Janine Collette. This came in my romance reveal box. And this is like a romance about a single mom who's like recently divorced, and her husband is still in her life because he, I believe, left her for someone that she was really close with, and they have kids, so there's still a lot of involvement there. And she meets this like local cop who is actually engaged to someone else, and she's supposed to design the wedding, not like plan the wedding, but design their wedding, and he doesn't really want to be with the person he's with. It is a very complicated book, that's why it's called what it is. There were a lot of tropes in here that I didn't like. The family was a little bit too involved. I'm not a big like single mom, single dad trope. It can be done well. I have enjoyed it, but this was not that for me. So this was also a 2.75 and 1.5 spice. Then the hit of that vlog was Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. This is a book that kind of plays a little bit with the multiverse in a fantasy setting, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it more than I thought I would. It's about these like chosen 5 or 6 kids to beat this like dark one. It takes like, there's a lot of twists and turns and stuff in this that you don't see coming. I think I kind of saw the main twist, but the way that it was done was still very enjoyable and very like, it fit within the story in ways where you would go back and go, oh, okay, I missed that, but now that makes sense. So really enjoyed this. I'm very upset that she didn't continue with the series. This was supposed to be book 1 of something, and she never wrote the rest of them, but I gave this 4 stars and 1 spice because there was a little bit of a romance, which did help keep the book going. I really did like that, but I loved all of the vibes in this and the like found family aspect, but also the mystery element to the fantasy as well. Okay, so that was all for that vlog, and now to touch on the series vlog. The first one I read in the series vlog this month was The Goal by Elle Kennedy. This follows John Logan and Sabrina, and it has a trope again that I'm not super happy about, but I did still like this. It was not my favorite of the series. That is Dean's book, The Score. That is my favorite book in the series, but I still like this. I liked that Sabrina was sprinkled throughout the book. She wasn't like a main character, but she was there, and I liked the way that her story tied in with this. And if you read The Score, you do kind of know what's going to happen in this book for the most part, because they are like, the timelines are lined up in them. So you get a little bit of like what's going on in the background in this book, in The Score, as well as like there's a little bit talked about what goes on in The Score in this book as well. So this was a 3.75 and 2 on spice. Then I finished out the Red Queen series. I'm not sure if I'm going to read The Broken Throne, which is the novella series, but if you watch the series vlog from this past month, you'll know that I was not thrilled with how this book ended, and I may have to go into that just to like satisfy myself eventually. Maybe, we'll see. But this is just the wrap up. I can't really talk too much about the overall story in this because it is the 4th in a series, but I did like how it was wrapped up. It was a little long. There was some stuff in here that I thought was a bit repetitive that could have been cut, but I still like how she wrapped it up. She left you with enough that you could end it here, but I was not completely satisfied. So I gave this 4 stars and 1 spice. Then I read the next book in the Lovelight Farm series. This is In the Weeds, and this follows Beckett and Evelyn. Beckett is like the farmhand. He basically runs the farm. You meet him in the first book, and then Evelyn is the influencer that is in the first book that comes to the farm to help it possibly win a competition. And you find out in that book that they have a little bit of a past, and then this book is basically their second chance. I was not a huge fan of Beckett's personality in this. It was a little off-putting, and which was kind of upsetting because I was really looking forward to this romance. But overall, I still would recommend it. It was a 3.25 for me and 1.5 on spice. And then I started The Dance of Thieves duology by Mary E. Pearson. I freaking loved this book. It was so good. It was fast-paced. It was an interesting story. It was something that, like, isn't your typical fantasy. There was a romance, obviously. It's a romantasy. And the world was very unique, and I really am excited to go into the second of the 2 books and see how that story ends. That is on my September TBR, so I will be reading that very soon. But overall, it's just about this, like, outlaw family that runs this part of the kingdom, and this girl that goes there looking for someone else ends up getting entwined in this family, and they're like, what do they call him? Can't remember what they call, like, the leader of it, but he's, like, a guy about her age that has just recently taken over, is leading the family, which is also what leads that, like, part of the kingdom, and they get entwined in a situation that they have to work together, and things just kind of take off from there. And there's, like, an underlying story arc about, like, the king and what's going on with... There's, like, a king and a queen of this area, but they're not together. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but she works for the queen, and they both really don't like the king, which is not the queen's husband, if that makes sense. So, really enjoyed this. I did not read The Remnant Chronicles, which is the first part of this world, but you don't need to. They do talk about, I'm pretty sure, the people from that book, because there is, like, historical talk about things that happened. I'm assuming that's what those books were, but I still really enjoyed this without having to read that. 4.5 stars, 1 spice. I'm also really just trying to get through this fast because my AC is broken. I don't have any of the fans that I'm using in this room. So I'm trying to get through this. I have some chores today, and then I'm going to my parents' house so I don't die from sweating. So the next 4 books I'm going to talk about were supposed to be in a vlog, but then I deleted all the footage. So that is why there was no video this past weekend. I thought I edited that vlog already, and I had not. But it is what it is. This was supposed to be finishing my summer TBR. So I'm still going to talk about them together, but we'll talk a little bit more in detail. The first was The Bodyguard by Katherine Sonner. This is about a famous actor who has to go back home to help because his mother is sick, but he has, like, a stalker that is in that area, and they don't really want anyone to know that he's there. So they hire out Hannah, who is like a, what do they call it? Like a protection agent, not like a bodyguard, but they call him something special, to go with him and keep him safe. Like, his people hire her people, and she's the one that they send. And he doesn't want his family to know that there's a stalker situation. He doesn't want to stress them out more, so she poses as his girlfriend. That's all you really need to know. So it was a very, like, heartwarming, sweet book. It was not very spicy, which I enjoyed because I do like a little bit of a closed-door romance every now and again. And I would classify this more towards that. There was, like, a teeny bit of spice. But really enjoyable read. Katherine Sonner's writing is beautiful. Her story was well put together, and the romance was sweet. So, very successful read in my opinion. So this was a 4.25 in half spice. And then I did it. I started Binding 13. I started the Boys of Tommen series. This follows Johnny and Shannon, and they're in, like, I believe it's like high school basically in Ireland, and she is sent to Tommen College. They call it a college, but I'm pretty sure they're like high school age. And they have, like, this rugby team that is, like, super popular. They usually are very good, but they're struggling a little bit this season. And Johnny is, like, their star player, and he actually plays a little bit pro from what I understand about the rugby circuit that they explain in this. I'm not a rugby person, so I don't know exactly. But she is sent to this school because she is bullied and, like, goes through a lot of rough things at her old school. So her mother moves her to Tommen because they have, like, an anti-bullying policy and everything. And they have this, like, really awkward meeting, like, how they meet, and from there, like, Johnny just feels really protective of her, and he doesn't really know why, and he's just drawn to her and can't stay away from her, even though he keeps getting told he needs to. He's got some secrets that he's holding about. He has like things going on in rugby and things going on in his life that he's not being completely honest with everybody in his life about, and she has things that she's not being very honest about her life with him, and even her two best friends that are actually at Tom in college with her. So there's a lot of like angst and troubling events that happen in this book. It is not for the like faint-hearted. There is a lot of deep emotional things that happen in this, and there's also probably things that would trigger some people, so definitely make sure you look at that. I'm sure that everybody knows about these books by now, but I really loved this book, and for it being like as big as it is, I know it doesn't seem thick, but it's a big book and the writing's very small. I flew through this. This was one of the ones that you can read on Kindle Unlimited, and I did kind of go back and forth just because this book was a lot to hold on to, but this was a 5-star read for me. I went back and forth between a 4.5 and a 5, but I have not stopped thinking about them, so I definitely think that in my personal mind that it is going to just sit as a 5-star, so that is why I bumped it up. And just one spice. It's not very spicy at all. It's a very slow build, which I also really liked because I think that helped the story. Then I read Good Girl Complex, which is the first book in Elle Kennedy's Avalon Bay series, and this is about Mac and Cooper. Cooper is like a local townie to Avalon Bay. Mac kind of goes there to go to school after a gap year, but she doesn't really want to be in college. She's from a very affluential family, she has like the kind of boyfriend that everybody in that town that's a townie like hates because he thinks he's better than everybody, and you know, he's going on and doing stuff behind his girlfriend's back because he's been there for a few years longer than her because he's a little bit older. And it starts off with like Cooper trying to split them up to get back at Mac's boyfriend, and the relationship just kind of takes off from there. They do become like friends and everything, and he begins to see that she's not the normal, like they call them clones of like rich people that come to that town to go to Avalon Bay College, Garnet College, which is the college in Avalon Bay, and she realizes that like she's just been doing things to make everybody else in her life happy and not really what she wants. So it was enjoyable. It was not my favorite, like going from reading like the off-campus series to this, like the characters were not my favorite. And I did read, we can talk about that now too, just because I read the second book as well. It was an interesting summer romance. I didn't hate it, but it was just like a 3.5-star read for me. Nothing that I'm gonna go screaming to the like world about, but still a fun summer read. 1.5 spice, 3.5 stars. Then I'm gonna skip to this one because I did just recently finish up Bad Girl Reputation, which is about Cooper's twin brother, Evan, who would obviously be in the first one, and then his ex-girlfriend Genevieve comes back to town, and you see him like moping about her and like making bad decisions about his life in the first book because she just kind of left town and never said anything, and he still hung up on her. And she comes back to town for a family issue and ends up kind of staying, and he tries to win her back. And that's basically the gist of this book. I didn't love this one as much. It was kind of like, it just didn't do anything for me. I ended up giving it like a 3.25, so it's still a book I would recommend. Like, the series isn't bad, it's just not anything that I'm gonna, like, again, talk about over and over again. I read it. There's still one more book, The Summer Girl. I was gonna read that, and then after this one, I was like, I just need a break. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna get to that this year. I'll just wait till next summer to finish that series up, but this was 3.25 and 1 spice. And then back to the final book that was supposed to be in the Finishing My Summer TBR. That is Matthew Perry's Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. I don't rate nonfiction, so I didn't rate it. But this book starts off and to the point where I almost, like the first 4 lines of the book, I almost made me put it back down. Just because what has happened to him is still so fresh in my mind, even though it's been about a year. And they recently did just arrest people in his death. But the things that he talks about in this book and how he like has overcome his problems and all of the near-death experiences he had and how he shouldn't be alive and everything hits a lot harder now because of what happened. So it was a very difficult book to get through. It was a very emotional read for me. It took me like an entire week to slowly go through this, and it's only like a 250-page book. So that tells you all you need to know. If you love Friends, if you love Matthew Perry, highly, highly recommend, but do know that it is a very dark book. All right, so to talk about some series that I read, and this is me, because I'll either completely binge a series or it takes me like 7 years to do it. But one that I completely binged because Larry Reeds put up a TikTok that I saw about the 4th book that just came out in this series and how it was phenomenal. And I had already listened to the audiobook of the first 2, so I went out and I bought all 4 of them and I read the first 2 physically and then moved on to the 3rd and 4th. Freaking love this series. Highly recommend. And there's still one more book at least that's coming out, and it's one that I'm really looking forward to. And that is the Windy City series by Liz Tom Ford. I loved this. She knows how to write a man, let me just tell you. So Mile High follows Stevie and Xander's. This is a hockey romance. She is their flight attendant. He is like the star defenseman, and he is like the reformed bad boy because, you know, he has like a girl in every town that they go to, as well as some in Chicago that he hooks up with all the time, and he meets her and immediately wants to like change his ways. So he has to convince her that he obviously isn't still going around and hooking up with everybody, but she's not so easily swayed. She lives across the street from him too, because her brother is like a famous basketball player, which is how she ended up in Chicago. I liked this book. They're not my favorite couple out of the series because I'm not a huge fan of Xander's. I love Stevie, but Xander's, there's just something about him that I didn't love. I didn't hate him by any means. Like, he does, by the end of the book, I really liked him, but like the first half of the book, I can't really stand him. So I gave this 4 stars and 2.5 spice. These books are pretty spicy, but that's fine. Then the second book in the series is The Right Move, and this follows Stevie's brother, Ryan Shea, and then her best friend and also flight attendant, Indy. And Indy is coming off of a very long relationship that ended badly and needs some place to stay because she has lost her friends, she has lost her apartment, she has lost her boyfriend. And Stevie suggests she moves in with Ryan because he has the space, he doesn't need the rent money, and she's trying to save money for some things going on in her life. And there's a meeting in the first book where she comes to their like apartment super emotional, and Ryan just has no idea what to do. So every time they meet, it's like a very awkward situation and a very weird situation, and she thinks that he hates her. But Ryan Shea is literally the most perfect book boyfriend anyone has ever written. I freaking love him. And his love language is definitely like acts of service, and he does all this stuff without expecting anything in return, which is obviously what that is, but their relationship is adorable. He is perfect. I loved this book. This was a 5-star read and 2 spice, but basketball romance, if I didn't already say that. All of these are sports romances that take place in Chicago and the main Chicago teams. Then the third one is Caught Up, which is baseball romance, and this follows Kai and Miller, and Kai is the star pitcher for the Chicago team, and he is a single dad because he finds out that this hookup that he had a baby. She didn't want him, so she kind of just was like, here you go, have a baby. So he's struggling to deal with being a single dad on the road as a baseball player because the baby has to go with him. It's a baby. And he just goes through nannies because he doesn't trust anybody with his kid. Male, female, nothing. He just, they don't even last a week. So Miller comes back into town. She's like a famous chef. And her dad is the coach. They keep calling him a coach, but I'm pretty sure in baseball it's considered a manager. But they call him coach a lot in this. But he's like the manager of the baseball team. And he suggests that Miller tries to be the nanny for this baby because he wants to spend time with her while she has some time off in the summer. And nanny, single dad romance. Again, Kai is just, they call him baseball Superman, like baseball's Clark Kent, because he has the thick wireframe glasses, and I loved this book. This was a 4.75, so close to a 5-star read, but it just didn't give me the same feelings as The Right Move, so I gave this a 4.75 and 2.5 on spice. This is a very spicy book, but their relationship is just adorable, and they both go through a lot of life-changing decisions together, and I just love how this one turned out. And then finally, Play Along by Liz Tomforde, and this is the book that Larry was raving about that I had to pick up. And this is Isaiah and Kennedy, and you meet Isaiah, you actually meet them both in the third book because Isaiah is Kai's brother, and he's the shortstop for the baseball team, and Kennedy is one of the physical therapist trainer kind of people on the team. And we know Isaiah has a huge crush on Kennedy. It is very apparent in the first book, but he's also kind of a player, but he's obsessed with Kennedy, and he's been obsessed with her since he met her, and I love that trope. I love the trope where a guy meets a girl, and when his friends are like, who's that? And he's like, that's my future wife. I love that trope. I will eat it up every time, and that's what this was. He was boy obsessed, absolutely golden retriever for her. He wanted everything that she wanted, regardless of what that put them relationship-wise, and this is a marriage of convenience. Well, no. This is a accidental marriage that they just kind of decide to let go for a while, because if they break up, it could ruin her career. It wouldn't really affect him, but it would ruin her career, and he doesn't want that because he really does care about her. And the things that this man does in this book, and he is just so adorable, and he's colorblind, and I just like felt so bad for him when they were like, he was trying to match his clothes and he couldn't. Like, it was just adorable. It was so cute. I love this couple. I loved this story. I have not stopped thinking about it since I read it. So this was another 5-star read for me, and 2.5 spice. So that was 3 5-star reads so far this month. I think that might have been it. Yeah, I had 3 5-star reads. All romances, which is so bizarre because I don't usually rate romances that high. All right, we need to finish this up because I'm getting sweaty and we still have quite a few books to talk about. Real quickly, I'm just going to go through the 3 books in the Mortal Instruments series that I finished this month. Can't really talk about too much that goes on in them because they are the 4th, 5th, and 6th book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare, which is part of the Shadowhunters universe. This is the first series that she wrote in the Shadowhunters universe, I'm pretty sure. So the first one is City of Fallen Angels. This is book 4. I can't really talk about what happens, but this is the second, like, there's a story that kind of concludes in the first 3 books, and then you get a little bit of a cliffhanger that leads into the story that basically takes over these 3 books. So, 4th book, City of Fallen Angels. This was a 4-star and half spice. Then we have City of Lost Souls, book 5. This was 4.25 stars and half a spice. And then the final book is City of Heavenly Fire. This was a 4.5 and a 1 on spice. So I love this series. I actually still think I prefer it. I think I prefer it over the Infernal Devices, which is really weird because people loved the Infernal Devices. But there was one character in there that I was not a huge fan of. So that kind of, and it was one of the main characters, so that kind of put that series a little bit lower than this one for me, I think. This is also a very nostalgic series for me. This is the only one that I've read as, like, I don't even know, like a young adult that I've now read as an adult, and I still loved it. I love the characters in these 6 books in particular, and again, I will, like, scream this from the rooftops. If you're going to read the Shadowhunters books, read it in the order that Cassandra Clare tells you to read it, because it makes so much sense. The stories just flow so easily. In a nutshell, so far, what I've read is the first half of the Mortal Instruments, and then I read the first book in the Eldest Curses duology, which is like a Magnus and Alec series, and that was the Red Scrolls of Magic, and then you read the Infernal Devices, and then you go back and you read the final 3 here, and then there's a few, like, standalone novella collections that come next before the final 2 trilogies, and then there is going to be another trilogy that I heard she's writing, so I'm very excited for that as well. Shadowhunters fight demons, deal with all the downworlders, like vampires, werewolves, fairy, like there's 2 types of fairies, the Seelie and the non-Seelie. So it's just a fun, fantastical world. I really enjoy it. I'm very much looking forward to completing that whole universe this year. I'm on my way to doing that, and it's going great so far. So the literary fiction book that I read this month is Honey by Isabel Bonta, and this is a book about a pop star growing up in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, and all the stuff that she goes through, and it's very reminiscent of, like, what do I want to say, like Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson, and Christina Aguilera. There's, like, characters, there's 3 female characters that I could say relate to that, and then there's a male boy group that I want to say is kind of like the NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys of that time. That was the vibe that I got from this book, and it was all the stuff that our main character had to go through. Amber had to go through in order to try to make it in the industry, and it was a kind of a heavier read. I liked this, but it was not something I think everybody would like, so I gave this 3.5 and 1.5 spice. There were some disturbing things that happened in this, which is actually probably quite accurate to what really happens, but still isn't that much fun to read about. But this was a very nostalgic read for me because it did take me back to, like, a lot of things from my childhood and the like inner workings of what was going on behind the scenes with, like, Christina Aguilera, Jessica Simpson, and Britney Spears. So definitely an interesting contemporary literary fiction. I'm not exactly sure what it was considered, but then I picked up another Emily Henry read. This is Book Lovers, and this follows Nora and Charlie. So Charlie's an editor for the same company that Nora works for as an agent, and they have, like, a meeting at the beginning where he basically turns down a book from one of her people that ends up being extremely popular and is actually the reason that they meet later on again in this book. So they're both in this, like, random town in North Carolina, escaping the city for their own reasons. and she finds out more and more about him and why he turned that book down and everything. So there's a really like interesting family dynamic aspect to this book as well. There was a lot of family things going on, and her and her sister seem to be having like issues the whole time, so they have to work through that, and Charlie's going through a lot of things with his family in trying to make the decisions that are best for himself as well as them. And Nora's kind of questioning what she really wants out of life. But they both love New York, but also love their family. So that is the big dilemma in this whole thing, is like, do I do what I love or do I do what my family needs? I did really like this. It was probably one of my more favorite reads by her. I gave this 4.5 stars, which I think is the highest I rated any of her books. And 1 on Spice, not super spicy, which none of her books really are. And now I only have Funny Story left to read. So really liked this one. Again, I think it's my highest rated. It definitely was the one that made me feel the most out of her books so far. And again, I've read everything but Funny Story, which I hope to read very soon. The other thriller I read this month was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I really enjoyed this one. I love Riley Sager's writing. This is about this girl, Emma, who gets called back to this camp that she went to as a child, where her 3 bunkmates essentially just like walked out in the middle of the night and were never found again. And she comes back as a, like, I don't want to say counselor, but like a teacher for the, because it's like they do like arts and stuff. It's like a rich kid camp. She comes back. She's asked to come back when they reopen the camp years later to teach art. And things start to unfold the same way they did all those years ago when those 3 girls went missing. And there's a interesting twist to this that I didn't really see coming. And there was a little bit that I did kind of anticipate and did recognize that was going to happen, but it didn't end exactly how I was expecting. So that was a fun little twist at the end. Again, his writing, just like, he has the dual timelines in a lot of what he does. I think everything I've read for the most part has a dual timeline by him. I know Middle of the Night did. I can't remember if House Across the Lake. I feel like House Across the Lake had a little bit of that, but this does. It goes back and forth between her time at camp when she was younger and her time at camp now, and how that is intertwining. Loved this. It was 4 stars, half spice. Highly recommend. Riley Sager also does a little bit of a romance. I don't want to say it's a romance, but there's always like personal connections in his books as that aren't in most thrillers. Megan Miranda's another one that does that, which is why I really like her. She doesn't treat the book just like a thriller, that these people don't have lives and they don't have feelings and stuff. I feel like they're still able to develop personal connections with people, even though they're going through something very traumatic, and he's very similar to that as well in his writing. Then I read How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong, and this is about an author whose book is being turned into a TV series, and she has a very tragic childhood that is interwoven with this guy that went to her high school, who ends up being a writer for this TV show, and her family like hates him, she hates him, and he just wants to like make things better and have her forgive him for what happened. And I can't really talk about exactly what happened because I don't think, yeah. So Grant has like panic attacks and like he has a lot of anxiety about what happened in the past, so he's dealing with that, and Helen is dealing with the trauma from her past, and when they like meet face to face again, she is not willing to like try to talk at all, but he's like, I just want a chance, I just want to try to make this better. And he just adores her and thinks she's extremely talented, extremely successful, and he respects all of that. And eventually like they, you know, move through the friends part of their relationship, and it is a romance, so we all know that eventually it gets there. But this was definitely not as lighthearted as I thought it was going to be, and I was not sure how it was going to end. There were times that I was like, I don't know what she's going to do. Like, the way this book is titled, I didn't know how it was going to end. And she definitely kept me on my toes till the end with that. But this author is going to be the writer for one of Emily Henry's adaptations. I can't remember which one. Beach Read, maybe? Maybe Beach Read. And I really enjoyed her writing in this book, so I'm very, very looking forward to that adaptation, because A, I like that story, and B, if this author is the one writing the screenplay for it, I think it's going to be really good. So this was 3.5 stars, 1.5 spice. Very different type of storyline than I've ever read in a romance novel. And it also wasn't one that I think I 100% agreed with. That I can't really say why without giving away the book. There were things in this that Helen overcame to be with Grant that I don't think I could. Let's just put it that way. Then I read Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mauer, which is the second book in the Assistant to the Villain series. And this is like it's a romantasy, but it's like a comedic romantasy. I want to say it's definitely more lighthearted and not as high stakes. Like, there is stuff that happens that could be considered high stakes, but it's definitely a more fun, whimsical type of a fantasy romance. And it's about Evie and the villain and what's going on in the kingdom that is like trying to sabotage him and sabotage what he does. He's the villain, but he's not the villain, obviously, because he's our main character, one of our main characters. This follows a few different people this time, so you did get more POVs than just Evie and the villain, which I liked because it's developing the story for some of the other characters before the third book comes out next year sometime. I can't wait because this book, I don't want to say it ended on a cliffhanger, but I'm interested to see where the third book takes Evie's story because I really like her. She is awesome. Her character is just awesome. And this picks up off the cliffhanger from the first book where things started to take a high stakes. And I did say when I read the first book that I didn't feel the romance that much. I loved the characters. I loved their relationships, but it felt more like a really good friendship than than a romance. This one definitely amped that up. While it's still not like the steamiest like romance that's gonna give me like all these feelings, it's still really fun, and I still I still have this like need for the characters to be together, if that makes sense. So I love this series. It is such a fun time. Highly recommend. 4.25 on the star rating and half on spice. It's also not a very spicy book, so if you're not a huge fan of like spicy romantasy, which a lot of the like fae romances are, like a lot of like Olive, no, I want to say Olive. Throne of Glass isn't too spicy, but ACOTAR is obviously very spicy. Crescent City is really spicy. Powerless Trilogy is not too bad because it's YA. Nightbane, Lightlark, they're kind of spicy. I don't know, if you want something that's a little lighter on that part of a book, I definitely recommend that series. Also, if you're looking to get into the fantasy genre, it's definitely a place to start. Then I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This has been my favorite Ali Hazelwood book that I have read thus far. This was 4.5 stars, 1.5 spice, and this is about two physicists, a theoretical. Elsie is a theoretical physicist, and Jack is a experimental physicist. That is a lot of syllables. Experimental physicist. And in the physics world, the two types don't get along that well, and this is also a trope. I call it a trope, but it's a storyline from The Big Bang Theory too, that experimentalists and theoreticals, I don't know how you would say that, they think that the other one's kind of useless, but they both think that. So this starts off with Elsie, who is kind of like fake dating Jack's brother, because his family really wants him to be in a relationship, and he hires her through this like service to act as his girlfriend for a while, and she repeats it, which she's not really supposed to do. So Jack knows Elsie as his brother's girlfriend, and then ends up meeting her during an interview process for a job she's trying to get where he works, and is like, what the hell, you're lying to my brother, all this stuff. And she's like, no, I'm not, but it wasn't her secret to tell as to why his brother hired her. So there's this a little bit of animosity between them during the interviewing process, but you can definitely feel that chemistry, and it was very apparent that Jack was very smitten with Elsie the entire time. Took her a while to realize it, of course, but this was a really adorable romance, and I loved Jack. As like awkward as these two were, I just adored this. And Elsie was a very strong, like, STEM woman, as Ali Hazelwood tends to write, and I definitely think that this romance was the most relatable, but also the most realistic to me out of all of the ones I've read so far from her. And it was not really enemies to lovers, it was kind of a rivals to lovers, because she had reasons to hate him too that are ingrained in her past, again, because of that little bit of a rivalry between the two types of physicists, but also a more personal connection that you learn about. So 4.5 stars, 1.5 spice, highly, highly, highly recommend this one. And now I only have Bride and Non-Love to read by her, and her novellas, so I guess I still have quite a few, actually. Talking like I'm almost done with her books, and I still have 3 more to read. And she's got Deep End coming out in February that I just pre-ordered. I don't think that's a STEMinist, though, because I think it's like a swimmer, a diver, something like that. It's gonna be like a sports romance, I think. Then I picked up The Grandest Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a spin-off of the Inheritance games, so it is not like The Brothers Hawthorne, which was a continuation of the Inheritance games. This is going to be a new spin-off, because Games Untold comes out in November, which is the, like, I think last part of possibly the Inheritance Games original series, and that's going to be novellas. And then Glorious Rivals, which is the second book in this, and this kind of ends off on a cliffhanger, comes in summer of 2025. And I did think I saw a date, but I can't remember what that is. Anyway, this is about the game that Avery and the Hawthorne brothers build out of the inheritance that she has left. And she just wants to, like, share that money with the world. And they build this game that is very similar to the game that Tobias Hawthorne made them all play to figure out the whole inheritance situation. I sincerely hope all that saved because my battery just died. But anyway, they build this game that is very similar to, like, the things that they had to go through, all the puzzles and the things they had to go through to figure out the inheritance situation. But she has now made it almost like a Willy Wonka situation where she picks 3 people. She handpicks 3 people, and I think 4, like, tickets are hidden around the world, and you have to find one in order to win acceptance and entry into the game. And then you win a cash prize at the end. This one was a little more twisty because there's obviously, like, outside people involved. And now that this is, like, an established game, there's people trying to, like, rig it and everything. And Grayson is still probably the most prominent Hawthorne, and he's still in this book. And his relationships with some of the other contestants are definitely stronger than, like, what the other Hawthorne brothers are, involvement-wise. But anyway, I don't know how to describe that other than, like, he was definitely still the main star of the Hawthorne family in this book. And this left off on a cliffhanger. I'm so excited for it to come out. I can't wait till next summer to read how this story, I don't know if it's going to conclude. I don't know if there's going to be other ones, but I want to continue this story. Her writing is so fascinating and so much fun, and, like, the things that she thinks of and the puzzles that she thinks of, so fun. So fast-paced. I read this book so quickly. But this was a 4-star, half spice. Highly recommend getting into this series if you liked the Inheritance Games. And then quickly, the final book that I read this month was Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This was kind of just picked it up on the last day of the month, couldn't put it down, finished it out. And this is my first Brandon Sanderson book. I do want to tackle the Mistborn series next year. So wanted to read this before the end of the year just to make sure that I did like his writing, and I really did enjoy it. This will be in a vlog that's not out yet, but highly recommend. Really fun standalone, very interesting story, very good segue, I think, into the Cosmere, because I did get a little bit of an understanding of that world in this without diving into a 6-book series, because I think Mistborn is, like, 2 different trilogies. Not 100% sure, still learning his world, but I know the Cosmere is it's kind of like the Shadowhunters world. There's all these different series within that universe. So once I finish the Shadowhunters, at least as much as I can until she releases that next trilogy, the Cosmere is the next universe I'm going to tackle. And I really liked this book. Again, I will talk about it in another vlog more, but definitely enjoyed my first foray into Brandon Sanderson's writing. This was a 4.5, no spice. No spice. And it was a very whimsical fantasy. He put a lot of humor in there that helped keep the story going. It was not like a super, super, super serious high fantasy novel, but it still wasn't a romantasy. So it's a perfect kind of, like, if you're not sure if you can read a fantasy without a lot of romance, try that book. Definitely try that book. So that was the last one for the month. I really hope that the whole long-winded part of the beginning of this was saved. I hope this isn't going to be too long, but if you have made it this far, thank you so much. And I hope you had a great reading month. Let me know in the comments below what was your favorite book that you read during August. And we'll see if I read it, and if not, I'll add it to my list. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.